Carved into the granite ahead of us are 4 faces, and each one is taller than a 6-story building. They took 14 years, around 400 workers, and just under $1 million to make, and roughly 90% of the carving was done with dynamite. Nobody died making them. One of the faces had to be blasted off the mountain and started over, and there is an unfinished secret chamber hidden behind their heads. This is Mount Rushmore in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Today we walk right up beneath it on the Presidential Trail, and along the way I will tell you the whole improbable story of how a mountain became a monument. We are in the Black Hills of western South Dakota, about 3 miles from the little mining town of Keystone and roughly 25 miles southwest of Rapid City. The memorial sits near 5,700 feet, folded into granite peaks and ponderosa pine. The Black Hills themselves are an island of mountains rising out of the northern Great Plains, a rough oval more than 100 miles long. Approach them across the prairie, and they appear on the horizon as a low, dark wall of pine, which is exactly how they got their name. Our walk today is a short loop of about a mile that carries us from the Grand Terrace to the jumbled rock directly below the faces. From here, the numbers start to feel real. Each head is about 60 feet tall, roughly the height of a 6-story building. George Washington's nose alone is around 20 feet long, each eye is about 11 feet across, and each mouth stretches some 18 feet. If these presidents had been carved head to toe at the same scale, they would stand well over 400 feet tall. Sculptors usually work in clay and bronze at human size, so keep that scale in mind as we get closer, because everything about this place was a gamble against it. The Black Hills are one of the stranger landscapes in North America, a dome of ancient rock pushed up through the plains and then carved down by erosion. At their center rises Black Elk Peak at over 7,200 feet, among the highest summits between the Rocky Mountains and the Atlantic. The uplift stripped away younger layers and exposed a core of granite and schist that is vastly older than the prairie around it. Around that core, the land falls away in rings of forested ridges, red sandstone valleys, and finally open grassland. The hills make their own weather too, catching more rain and snow than the plains below, which is why they stand so green and dark against the horizon. The rock the faces are carved from is Harney Peak granite, and it is on the order of 1.7 billion years old. It formed deep underground as molten rock that pushed into even older layers of dark mica schist, then cooled slowly into a hard, fine-grained stone. You can still see the meeting of the 2 rocks on the mountain today, pale granite above and darker streaks of schist along the flanks. That hardness is the whole reason this memorial exists here, because this granite erodes at only about 1 inch every 10,000 years. Carve a face into stone like that, and you have made something on a geologic timescale. This walkway is the Avenue of Flags, added for the American Bicentennial in 1976. There are 56 flags in all, one for each state, plus the district, the commonwealths, and the territories, arranged in alphabetical order down both sides. It is one of the most photographed walkways in the country, and it frames the mountain almost like a gun sight. It is worth remembering that when the carving began, there were only 48 states in the Union. The mountain has outlasted the map, and it will keep doing so. Long before any carving, this mountain already had a name. To the Lakota, it is Tunkasilla Sac, the Six Grandfathers, and the Black Hills as a whole, the Pahasapa, hold deep spiritual importance for the Lakota and other tribal nations. In 1868, the Treaty of Fort Laramie recognized the Black Hills as part of the Great Sioux Reservation. Then in 1874, an Army expedition reported gold in the hills. Prospectors poured in, and within a few years the United States had taken the land. That older history is part of this place, and the mountain carries both of its names. The name on the map today comes from a joke on a prospecting trip. In 1885, a young New York attorney named Charles Rushmore came out to the Black Hills to check on tin mining claims near Keystone. Riding past this granite peak, he asked his local guide what it was called, and the answer came back that it had never had a name, so they would call the thing Rushmore. Remarkably, the name stuck and was later made official. Decades on, when the carving began, Rushmore himself donated $5,000 to the project, one of the largest early private gifts, which may make him the only lawyer in history to buy naming rights with a punchline. The idea of carving these mountains belongs to a quiet state historian named Doane Robinson. In the early 1920s, he watched tourists ride the new highway straight past South Dakota and wanted to give them a reason to stop. His plan was to carve giant figures of Western heroes into the granite spires called the Needles, south of here. He imagined Lakota leader Red Cloud, explorers Lewis and Clark, and showman Buffalo Bill Cody standing in stone along the skyline. In 1924, he wrote to a famous and famously difficult sculptor, and that letter changed this mountain forever. Gutzon Borglum was born in 1867 on the Idaho frontier, the son of Danish immigrants, and he clawed his way up to study art in Paris, where he knew the great sculptor Auguste Rodin. By the 20s, he was one of the best-known sculptors in America, with work in the United States Capitol and an ego to match his ambition. He had just spent years on a colossal Confederate carving at Stone Mountain in Georgia, a project that collapsed in a bitter dispute and left him looking for a mountain of his own. Robinson's letter offered him exactly that. Borglum came west in 1924, took one look at the plan, and immediately began changing it. Borglum rejected the Needles almost at once. The spires were too thin and too weathered to hold giant figures, and he had no interest in regional heroes anyway, insisting a carving this size had to speak for the whole nation. So he scouted the hills for better stone and found it here, a wall of sound, fine-grained granite about 400 feet high. Just as important, the face of the mountain looks toward the southeast, which means it catches direct sunlight for most of the day. Standing near this spot, Borglum declared that American history itself would march along that skyline. Borglum chose 4 presidents to tell one continuous story. Washington stands for the founding of the Republic, and Jefferson for its expansion, since his Louisiana Purchase roughly doubled the country and included the very ground we are walking on. Lincoln stands for preservation, the Union held together through Civil War. Theodore Roosevelt was the controversial pick, dead only a few years when the carving began, but Borglum argued he stood for development, the Panama Canal, and the protection of public lands like this one. 4 faces, one argument in granite about how a nation is built. The project needed money, and money needed politics. In the summer of 1927, President Calvin Coolidge set up his summer White House in the Black Hills, and the locals worked hard to charm him, presenting the buttoned-up New Englander with cowboy boots and a 10-gallon hat, which he wore. That August, Coolidge rode up to the mountain and gave the dedication speech, calling the carving a national shrine and pledging federal support. Borglum then climbed the face and ceremonially drilled the first holes. On October 4, 1927, the carving of Mount Rushmore officially began. The men who carved this mountain were not artists. They were miners, mostly out-of-work locals from the gold mines around Keystone, and about 400 of them worked here over the 14 years of the project. Every morning they climbed several hundred wooden stairs to the top of the mountain before the workday even started. The pay was decent for the Depression, and in hard years, a job on the mountain was a lifeline for families in these hills. Many of them started out calling it just another job, and ended their lives calling it the proudest thing they ever did. To carve the faces, the drillers were lowered over the top of the cliff in leather bosun chairs, hanging from steel cables about as thick as a finger. Up top, hand-cranked winches paid the cable out, and because the winchmen could not see over the edge, young call boys sat on the rim shouting orders up and down the rock face. A driller dangled hundreds of feet above the valley floor with a heavy jackhammer bucking in his hands, drilling holes for the powdermen. Photographs from the era show men casually leaning back in their chairs against the sky, eating lunch on the president's forehead. It was dangerous, deafening, dusty work, and they did it summer after summer. Here is the number that surprises everyone. Roughly 90% of Mount Rushmore was carved with dynamite. The powdermen became so precise that they could blast the rock away to within just a few inches of the final carved surface. Charges were set off at lunchtime, and at the end of each shift, when the mountain was clear of workers. In all, around 450,000 tons of granite came thundering off this cliff. Almost all of it is still lying exactly where it fell, in the great pale heap of broken rock you can see below the faces today. After the dynamite came the finish work. Drillers cut shallow holes in a tight grid, a technique they called honeycombing, which weakened the last skin of rock so it could be pried away in small pieces by hand. Then came bumping, where a worker swept a pneumatic hammer back and forth across the granite until the surface was as smooth as a poured sidewalk. That is the surface you see shining on the faces today, stone polished by miners with air hammers. Depression-era mine workers, it turned out, could finish granite like Renaissance craftsmen. Now look at Thomas Jefferson, because he is not where he started. Work on Jefferson began in 1931 on the opposite side of Washington from where he stands today. After about 18 months of carving, the crews found the granite there was riddled with cracks and flawed rock that simply could not hold a face. So in 1934, they packed the unfinished portrait with dynamite and blasted it completely off the mountain. Jefferson was started again on Washington's other shoulder, tilted and pushed deep into sound stone, and the scar of the first attempt was blended back into the cliff so well that most visitors never suspect it happened. Each face got its own dedication as the years went by. Washington was unveiled first, on the 4th of July, 1930, behind an enormous American flag drawn aside like a curtain. Jefferson followed in 1936, with President Franklin Roosevelt watching from the crowd. Lincoln was dedicated in 1937, on the 150th anniversary of the Constitution. Theodore Roosevelt came last, in July of 1939, revealed at night under floodlights and fireworks for South Dakota's 50th year of statehood. The finest details on these faces owe much to an Italian immigrant stone carver named Luigi del Bianco. Borglum brought him on as Chief Carver, entrusting him with what Borglum called the refinement of expression, the delicate final passes that turn stone into personality. The famous trick is in the eyes. Each pupil is carved as a hollow with a slender shaft of granite left standing inside it, and when sunlight strikes that post, the eye appears to gleam with a lifelike sparkle. It is a sculptor's illusion, 60 feet tall, and it is why the president seemed to watch the horizon rather than stare blankly, and why Del Bianco's family spent decades making sure his name was remembered. Keep an eye on the rocks along here, because Mount Rushmore has a famous non-native resident. The white mountain goats that scramble around these cliffs are descended from a small group that Canada gave to nearby Custer State Park back in 1924. The goats promptly escaped their enclosure, found the granite high country entirely to their liking, and have been free citizens of the Black Hills ever since. Lower down, the ponderosa forest is busy with least chipmunks, squirrels, and mule deer. So if a shaggy white face peers down at you beside 4 stone presidents, that is a Canadian diplomatic gift gone happily feral. Borglum never intended the faces to stand alone. Behind the heads, he planned a grand hall of records, a chamber cut deep into the canyon wall, entered through polished doors, where the nation's founding documents and the story of the carving would be kept for the ages. He worried that in some far future, people might stare at these faces and have no idea who they were, the way we puzzle over the statues of vanished civilizations. In 1938, his crews began cutting the tunnel and drove it about 70 feet into the granite. Then Congress, watching costs, ordered every remaining dollar spent on the faces alone, and the hall was left as a rough, empty bore in the mountain. The story of that empty tunnel has a quiet sequel. In 1998, workers placed a repository in the floor of the unfinished hall, a teakwood box inside a titanium vault, sealed beneath a granite capstone weighing over 1,000 pounds. Inside are 16 porcelain enamel panels carrying the words of documents like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, along with the story of how and why this mountain was carved. No visitor can go in, and that is the point. It is a message meant for readers thousands of years from now, which finally gave Borglum's unfinished room its purpose. There was supposed to be writing on this mountain too. Borglum planned an entablature, a brief history of the United States carved in giant gilded letters on a panel shaped like the Louisiana Purchase. President Coolidge agreed to write the text, but when Borglum boldly edited the former president's words and the changes reached the newspapers, the embarrassed collaboration fell apart. The space reserved for the inscription ended up holding Lincoln's face instead. A national essay contest later chose a college student's history to represent the idea, and his winning text was eventually cast in bronze and mounted on a terrace here in 1973, the ghost of the mountain's missing paragraph. Borglum never saw the mountain finished. In March of 1941, at 73 years old, he died suddenly after surgery, with the memorial still scaffolded and unfinished. His son Lincoln Borglum, who had grown up on this mountain and worked every job on it, took charge of the final season. The original dream of carving the presidents to the waist was quietly set aside as money ran out and war approached. On October 31, 1941, the drills fell silent for the last time, and the memorial was declared complete as it stood. The final accounting of Mount Rushmore reads like a fable. 14 years of work, yet because of weather and funding gaps, only about 6.5 years of actual carving. A total cost of $989,992.32, most of it federal money, for a monument that has repaid itself in tourism thousands of times over. And the number that still amazes safety engineers. In all those years of hanging men from cables over a cliff with jackhammers and dynamite, not one worker died during the carving. For a 1930s heavy construction project, that record is very nearly as remarkable as the sculpture. Down this way stands the Sculptor'S Studio, built in 1939, and inside it lives the mountain's secret twin. Borglum worked from a plaster model built at 1/12 scale, where 1 inch on the model equals 1 foot of granite on the cliff. Measurements were transferred by a pointing machine, a great boom with a plumb line that could be swung and scaled up to find any point on the mountain. The model also preserves the dream that never happened, presidents with collars, coats, and hands, carved to the waist. Standing before it, you can see both the memorial that exists and the grander one that ran out of time. In 1959, Mount Rushmore got a second kind of fame when Alfred Hitchcock staged the climax of North by Northwest here, with Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint scrambling across the president's faces. The government, unamused by the idea of actors fighting on a national shrine, refused permission to film the chase on the real monument. So Hitchcock's crew rebuilt the faces as an enormous set in a Hollywood studio, and the famous scramble was shot entirely on plaster presidents. The publicity was priceless anyway, and visitation jumped as moviegoers came to see the cliff for themselves. Hollywood, it turns out, is the only outfit that ever carved Rushmore twice. Today, this memorial draws over 2 million visitors a year, from every state whose flag we walked beneath. On summer evenings, the amphitheater below fills for a lighting ceremony, and the faces emerge slowly out of the darkness under floodlight, which is still one of the great free spectacles in American travel. The broken granite from the blasting still lies in its mighty heap below the heads, never hauled away, a construction site frozen in 1941. Rangers here field the same delighted questions every day, and the answers never really get old. Yes, 90% dynamite, and no, nobody fell. The mountain still gets house calls. Every year, specialists rope down the faces to inspect and seal the network of fine cracks Borglum worked around, replacing his original homemade sealant with modern silicone. Electronic instruments are embedded in the rock to record the slightest movement of the granite blocks. The stone itself needs little help, since this granite erodes at roughly an inch every 10,000 years. The faces would take hundreds of thousands of years to soften noticeably. Barring catastrophe, this is one of the few human artworks that could genuinely outlast every civilization that remembers making it. Stand back from the details and the strangeness of this place comes through. A billion-year-old mountain, sacred to one people, renamed for a visiting lawyer, carved by unemployed miners into the faces of 4 men from national history, on the strength of one historian's tourism scheme. Every layer of that story is still visible here, in the granite and the names, in the tunnel behind the heads with its message to the far future. The Black Hills hold it all at once, the way mountains do. That is what makes this short walk one of the densest miles in American travel. So that is Mount Rushmore, a mountain that is equal parts geology, audacity, and Depression-era craftsmanship. 14 years, 400 workers, 90% dynamite, and 4 faces that will still be watching the horizon long after every one of us is history ourselves. If you are ever crossing western South Dakota, give this place more than a glance from the parking lot. Walk the trail, look up at the eyes, and think of the men swinging beneath them in leather chairs. There is always more mountain than monument here, and both are worth your time. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.